came up with them on his own or if he got them somewhere else. But we were going back and forth with some like the Anish Giri's like rapper name, 50%, and I was saying Dr. Draw. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Peter Lico, and even Peter Lico I find a much more entertaining player than Anish Giri. Maybe I haven't seen enough of his games. I might not be being fair, but I do not want to see Anish Giri as the world champion, although he could be. Okay, guys, let's take a look at this game, man. So, I got the computer off for now. Let's just take a look at this together. I mean, I got the benefit of going over this game with some of the commentators. I was on chess.com, Chess Bras. For the first 40 minutes, it was actually live on YouTube from the official site with Judith Polgar analyzing. Oh, Judith Polgar analyzing, folks. I mean, go check out the VOD on the World Chess Championship 2018 site on YouTube. It is worth it. She was there with Anna Rudolph commentating on the game, but Judith Polgar, folks, a gift to the chess world. She is spectacular, and she is still a super GM. Boys, was it a treat to listen to that girl talking about the game. I mean, I could just sit there cross-legged in front of that girl for 10 hours a day and listen to her talking about chess. So e4, c5. First move, ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise on the board. Magnus Carlsen plays c5. I think in the past games we've talked a lot about them playing e4 and e5, and they've gotten in a lot of different types of battles. They've been known to get into some Gyoko pianos, maybe even some Lopez-type positions. But those lines would be very well prepared. So I think Magnus just kind of wanted to get into a different kind of a game. But it's a little unusual to see him play the Sicilian on the first move. Knight to f3, knight c6, not d6. And then came bishop to b5, which is called the Rosalimo variation. Had instead black played the move d6, if white had continued on with bishop to b5, this is now a Moscow variation. Well, there's some differences. And most likely bishop to d7 is going to be played. And I played this line for many years, and I have many brilliancies with this line. It used to be considered the sort of the boring draw line for white against the Sicilian. And that opinion has changed a little bit over time. The line that I play is queen to e2. I believe I learned this from Lawrence Day. And I've also seen Jan Timman play this line. So a couple of very creative and speculative attacking style players. So the idea is that if bishop takes and queen takes, the only move to play for black to avoid losing the b-pawn is queen to d7. And in which case, if you do queen takes, I think the best move for black is actually king takes. And the reason for that is because on knight takes, now I'm going to be able to get moves in like knight to c3. And I got a couple of squares where I can come in and try to probe the c7 square. So probably best not to allow that, instead play king to d7. So I think Jan Timman has tried in this position the move knight to knight to a3 of all things. And it might also be possible just to play knight to c3 with the idea of later playing, let's say after g6, possibly playing knight to d5, threatening queen to c7, or knight to c7, which will win an exchange. Of course, if queen takes, then we're going to play knight to c7 anyways, and then recoup the queen. So anyways, none of that happened, but those are some of the differences in the position. So knight to c7, bishop to b5, g6, a standard reply. Another possibility here is to play the move a6, and after bishop takes, white's going to capture back with the queen pawn. The reason is so that now I can't play the move c3, preparing d4 like I would like, because of the temporary hole on d3 that the queen can pop into. And that just causes some frustrations for white. So instead in this line, you have to play the move d3 instead, which is fine, but a little bit slower. Instead, the move g6 was played, bishop takes, pawn takes, and d3, so we get into a similar kind of a position anyways. Oh yeah, there's been so many great commentators, Coldplay. Like, people were talking about it being like a candy store. I mean, like, oh my god, like, just on Twitch alone, there were so many different channels. Like, it just makes your head spin. I'm going to go back and watch some of the videos on demand, just because I want to see different people's takes, like, during the live games and stuff like that. It's just been really fun, and it's so fun to have this Twitch and Discord community, having you guys all kind of along for the ride, and people to talk to about the games and the analysis and stuff like that. It is so much fun. It's going to be a great World Championship, no matter what happens. Besides his nickname, The Artist, because he draws so much. I've never heard that one, Twitch. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Maybe we could call him Bob Ross. Bob Ross of the chess world because he draws so much. That's too funny, dude. That's hilarious. Sicilian Rosalimo opening. The way to win against the Sicilian. Yet Fabi screwed it up. Yeah, I love the Rosalimo. I'll tell you why I stopped playing the Rosalimo was because I don't know what it is. You know, we've all got our points in chess. Some areas where we do better than others, and I don't know why it is, but I've always had tremendous success against this pawn structure of blacks. With the double pawns, I can mangle and mess those pawns up even against 2,400 players. I've been known to just thrash them on the queen side. And I don't know why. It just seems kind of natural to me. I don't know why it's so easy for me to attack those pawns, but I always come up with what I believe are good quality plans, or maybe I've just gotten lucky. But the reason why I stopped playing that is because the standard lines, I like to play the move c3 and then d4, and I like to throw in h3 first. And I find it's very, very difficult for black to stop that plan. The problem is that even if I can get my pawn to c3 and my pawn to d4, I cannot force either the c or the e pawn to take my d pawn. And if they don't take that, then that means that I can't recapture back with my c pawn, getting the open c file, which is the whole point of why I'm doing this. To attack down that c file and make mincemeat out of those black pawns. So if they don't take it, then I found that my pawn gets static, and I usually have to play something like rook to c1, rook to c2, rook to d or e2, and sort of like slowly get my rook into the play that way, and I didn't like that. So that's why I switched to the Smith-Morra, because I found it was more consistent at getting rid of the c-pawn by just stone cold gambiting it, giving me the kinds of positions that I like to play that I do well in. But if I can get into my mainline Rosalimo in Moscow, I love these positions for white. They are not boring at all. Chesspatcher Wales, what's up, man? Was there a game today or something? There sure was. The World Championship game. Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana. Hopefully you got to catch some of it. The Chess Crab. I'll be on in 7 hours. Will you be around, Bertrout? 7 hours. I mean, it's 4 p.m. my time. So I might be Chess Crab. I'll keep an eye out for you. If I'm still up. Chess Crab's a new streamer, guys. If you guys want to go check him out, give him a follow. I haven't seen his show yet, but he's been really cool with the community and stuff like that. So, and very cool name. So, so go give him a check out, guys, and let's support the people in the streaming community who are positive to each other. The Rosalimo has been played before in World Championship. I remember years ago going through Rosalimo games on an old World Championship match. Is that right, Vertwitch? Chess Crab gives 100 bits. Oh, thank you very much, man. It's really, really kind of you. You didn't have to do that. It's very nice of you, man. Appreciate your support. I know that there was a Rosalimo game, and it might have been even this exact position we're looking at right now, where Nakamura played against Fabiano. I believe it was in the 2017 U.S. Championships. And in that line, Naka played knight to h6 here. I believe this was the position. And eventually he ended up putting his bishop on g7 and his queen on, and like his rook on b8 or something. Like somehow he did some crazy sack on b2, but then white got some activity back and it petered out into a draw. So this game followed a different path. Zed Nation, what's up, man? Caruana is a weenie for playing Rosalimo. Should have gone for the more open Sicilian. Zed Nation wants to see the. You're like Bear Twitch. He wants to see that more aggressive, but that's not Fabi's normal style. Fabi's normal style is to get a very sound position, and then when his opponent attacks too aggressively, to counter punch, defend the attack off, and then clean up all of his mistakes. So, and Pickle Pawn coming in with 50 biddies. What's up, Pickle Pawn? See, my bits, I don't have like special things like you guys. I don't know if that's why I'm not having bit problems, but like Pickle Pawn, Kingly Bingley told me that he was having streaming problems too. He had like 25% dropped frame rates. That was last night. So we're thinking that it's because like OBS Streamlabs, we used to be on beta and then they had this big update a few days ago. So we're wondering if like maybe that's the reason you guys have been having streaming problems. I haven't had those problems because I'm just on Stone Cold OBS. So I haven't had any such problems. Plus I don't have special graphics all the time for my bits and stuff like that. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that to you in case you were having any... Pickle Pawn had like ghost bits. They were like floating in his tip cup. They were just like floating like an apparition. It was really weird. I don't know what was going on there. But anyways, nice to have you, Pickle Pawn. Thank you so much for those bits. Right, I don't think it was your internet because you're not the only one. That several people have told me that now that they've been having problems with that. So I just wanted to give you the heads up there in case you were thinking of taking your system apart. So again, we're looking at this game. Fabiano Caruana is white versus Magnus Carlsen. Game 1 of the World Chess Championship just played, just finished about an hour ago. So bishop to g7, h3. The reason for h3 is because he doesn't want to allow bishop to g4. So now this bishop has some difficulties. As is typical in any opening, you're going to have problems with your so-called bad bishop, which is your queenside bishop. So this bishop's not going to have an easy time figuring out where to go. So knight to f6, knight to c3. So Fabi just completely gives up on any concept of like c3 and d4. He's just comfortable putting his pieces on aggressive squares. Very sound position. You know, it's not very sensational. And I'm not really, it's not my personal style. But I can understand why White wants to play like this. It's common sense to develop your knights before your bishops. He wants to finish his development, get castle, and then he can think about what he wants to do as far as the middle game plan. But he's not in any hurry to do that. Kingly, there's the man. Fell asleep towards the rook ending. What's up, everybody? It was over a 7-hour game today, guys. A 7 freaking hour game. Let's just move that over a little bit so you guys can see me okay. It was more than a 7-hour game. H3 makes the bishop stronger for the endgame. I don't like A3. Isn't it better just to allow bishop to G4 and then exchange it and move on? Or is H3 you're talking about? No, H3 is a common motif, and I definitely like this. Why would I want to give this bishop any prospects in the game? It's not bad for the bishop to get rid of this knight. This knight can come to E5 at some point in time. It also directly attacks the E5 pawn, either for a possible pawn push or to try to prevent the move E5, which it wasn't able to do in this particular game. But no, I feel like that's a pretty good exchange for black, generally speaking. And I always play the move H3 if I can to prevent that bishop to G4, even in the aggressive lines that I play. I don't want black to have any easy moves, and I don't want him to get this rook over on A8 into the game quickly. So the knight comes back to D2. This is already a bit of a surprising move. The knight goes to D2, so there's a direct attack on the knight on C3, but more importantly, there's an X-ray along these long diagonals. The knight has cleared the way for the bishop, so now E5 is playable. So white is just going to play bishop to E3. Another reason, by the way, why you want to play H3 is to prevent a possible knight move to G4. So say for example, So say, for example, in this position after knight here, knight to here, and bishop to E3, now knight to G4. So there's a couple of reasons why H3 makes a lot of sense. But on this move, a little bit of a surprise, knight to D7. So bishop to E3, and then E5. And the purpose for this is very simple, to put a vice on this square here, on the E5 square. Also, the move E5 covers F4. So possibly there's a possibility that this knight could remaneuver, let's say, for example, knight to F8 to E6 to F4, and try to land on this square right here. This draw hurt my soul, says Kingly Bingley. Man, it was not the result we expected, was it, guys? There's Harlem. Hey, what's up, Harlem? Hey, brother. Just doing a little look at the game from today, man. Ray Clay's in the stream. I know, man. Everybody's here, man. You guys are awesome. Vince Sylvan is in the building. Quinn is here. What's up, guys? I saw a lot of you guys in the chess.com there. I didn't want to flood their stuff with a bunch of personalized greetings, but I did see you guys there. It was so fun to see you guys. So we're taking a look at this this game here. So I already feel like on E5, and remember how we talked, guys? Okay. So for those of you who caught my streams the other day, we were talking about the styles of the two different players and what kind of things we might expect, right? Now, as far as the openings, we don't know what kind of openings are going to happen. As far as who's going to win, we don't know. We can't predict the future. We can take guesses. But as far as the style of the players, those are human qualities. And those human qualities are not going to change. When it comes right down to brass taxes, we're going to fall back on our instincts, right? And these are the world's greatest chess players. If there's anybody who can trust their chess instincts, it's these two guys. So they're going to do what they do. Magnus does not like to have pieces where his opponent can counter punch against them. He does not like to lose tempo by allowing his opponents to target his pieces. So you won't see Magnus Carlsen putting his pieces on aggressive squares where they can just be like chased off with pawn moves or something. That's why you see him playing deep back. His knight is on d7, his bishop is on g7. He's letting his pawns do the work in the center, supported by his pieces behind the pawns. Meanwhile, Fabiano Caruana, he's going to develop his pieces in central locations, sound pawns. He's not going to take any brash risks, and he's going to wait for his opponent to make moves that are a little bit too aggressive, and then counter punch and fend those attacks off, and then clean up with all the mistakes afterwards. Right? Those are their styles. So they're always going to fall back on their style, and I think this game really exemplifies exactly what we talked about. Cardinelga's in the house. What's up, Cardinelga? Let's give you guys all some, especially for Coldplay, who came in with a sub. Let's give you guys some, give you the high five, give you the cheers, Trout. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, the Timbits. We will give you some Timbits. Have some miniature donuts, everybody. And actually, let me show you this. I was prepared for the match today. And I actually got myself a box of Timbits. Just a little one. Just a little one. Because I got these bad teeth here. I'm going to be sensible with my teeth. But I did get my Timbits. Okay, I was ready. Yes, the infamous Timbits. Oh, Pickle Pond. Pickle Pond. If I could send you Timbits in the mail, I would. I really, really would. Okay, so thanks to you. RPD says, enjoying this fine analysis of the big game today. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. There's much better players out there to analyze these games, guys, but these are just a little bit of my takes based kind of on what we've talked about over the last couple of days. Remember how we talked about this, the player style, the contrast of styles, and we saw it in full display today. So White's going to castle, again, not playing anything speculative. And then comes the move b6, because he's got to do something about this bishop. He's got to make some decisions about that, but more important than that, he intends to move this knight. He intends to move this knight on d7 and regroup that piece. So that's not going to stay there forever. That was a temporary regroup so that he could push this e5 pawn and put a vice down on the d5 square. And it's possible that he could even remaneuver and go straight into the d5 square, where it's never going to be practical for White to take that, because it'll just untangle Black's pawns, and he'll have this just unbreakable pawn chain. So the move b6 is played, and then comes the move knight to h2. I think what a lot of people were thinking, and I know that Judith Polgar mentioned moves like knight to d2. Already here there were people talking about this plan of like a3 and b4. I don't buy this plan, guys, because I guess it's because I've played a lot of Rosa Lemos, so I have a sense of like what kind of things you're supposed to do to break up these pawns, and that's not it. I don't want to loosen up my long diagonal like that, especially with the possibility of this knight regrouping to the f5 square. I don't want to be in a situation where I can't take it because I'm afraid of some sort of like issues on the long diagonal when the pawn takes back. I don't want to have those kinds of problems. So the last thing in the world I want to do is move this b pawn. Here in this position, the move that I would have played was a4. This is the move that I thought of. And if we turn on the computer for a quick second, okay, so White's holding his normal opening advantage. You know, a few little tenths of a pawn. Very small advantage. Normal for the opening. If we play the move knight to h2, it changes very slightly again. Basically, it's much the same. White has some very small advantage. Okay? And the purpose of this, of course, is to play the move f4, and that's how White is going to deal with the possibility of a knight hopping into that square. Is to just open it up and take that pawn completely away. So we can't do that. If you were to play the move knight to d2, once again you see that the evaluation doesn't change terribly. Now maybe it's saying that Black has a little something getting out of it. But basically the problem is White's position is fundamentally sound. He has a powerful pawn chain. He has a very powerful pawn chain that's not easy to break. Black has at least one static pawn. I suppose this one's not technically static. It could go forward, but not right now because it's double attacked. There's no purpose to it. So there's static pawns, most importantly the e-pawn, allowing the possibility of the f4 pawn push. So White has a very stable position. If we were to play the move a3, as some of the commentators suggested, you can see that the lines are still saying, again, there's multiple lines where White maintains a small advantage. So this is a consistent, strong advantage. That's why Fabi plays like this. He doesn't want a situation where he's in some critical position where if he doesn't play the exact perfect move, he's going to lose the game. He doesn't want that. He wants a situation which is fundamentally sound, so if some surprise comes up, his position is still basically sound. Now my move was to play the move A4. Now let's see what the computer says about that. The computer likes my move A4. The reason for A4 is a couple of reasons. Number one, you're trying to prevent a possible B5 at some future point in time. You're making extra possibilities for this rook in case you ever have to do something to defend the B2 square or get out of the way of an attack on the B2 square. But most importantly, you're threatening to just simply expand by continuing to push this pawn forward. So you're just making a vice on the black side. This pawn is not going any further right now, by the way. That pawn's just going to sit there on A4 probably until the endgame. But you're just trying to control the black side of the board so that you can focus on your king side. By playing this move, you're making a useful move that does not hurt your position on the queen side, potentially weakening the c pawns in the future, and gaining space. But most importantly, you don't have to make a committal move like knight to h2, because although knight to h2 I think is probably an okay move, you'll see the kind of difficulties that he gets into because of that move. So if he was going to do anything, I mean, the reason I think why he chose knight to h2 instead of knight to d2 is because I think he thought that maybe he was coming to g4 someday and he could take advantage of these squares. I don't know, what do you guys think of this move, knight to h2? I feel like that was the first inaccuracy by white. Hey Sparry, what's up? Kind of hard to explain it like the Trout does. Oh, thanks, Ray Clay. That move blew me away. Which move are you talking about, Harlem? The Burchout Cup? Is there a Burchout Cup? Oh, Harlem's got my Burchout Cup. I have a Harlem Night Cup on the way, man. I'm expecting it any day. It's going to be fantastic. Can't wait to drink coffee from my Harlem Cup live on the show. It's going to be great. Agreed regarding black's double pawns. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. I'm really sorry. The music's got to go down a little bit because my voice is pretty hoarse. Because I'm forced to like bend over, so like it's kind of exhausting a little bit because I don't have a proper setup here. Hey, what's up, Testing? How you doing, man? Welcome to the Trout Show. We got chess on the beach next year in Swansea. Holy cow. I got to show you guys some pictures. I had a friend, or a local guy from the chess community. Him and his wife took a trip in Poland. Might have even started in Prague. Anyways, it was a train trip through Europe with stopovers in major cities where they played a chess tournament on the freaking train over the course of like a week or 10 days. So you play a game of chess, they let you off in a port, you explore the city for the night, you drink some wine, you get back on the train the next day, you go to the next town, play another game of chess on the train. Can you believe that? I have pictures of it. It's incredible. I would do anything to take that trip. But this chess potter's Wales talking about chess on the beach in Swansea, boy, that's pretty tempting too, man. Was this the beginning of that middle game period where Fabi was basically losing? I mean, I guess what I would say, Quinn, is that I feel like this is the point where Magnus started having ideas. But you could also say that maybe this was Fabi's plan to try to provoke something by black. Missed the ending. Yeah, well, you didn't miss too much testing. It was pretty boring the last little while. It was drawn for quite a while. Magnus did give it a good effort. Okay, knight to h2. Knight to f8. This was probably a shocking move if you're a beginner player or something like that, or even an intermediate. This move, knight to f8, must seem very strange. Black's king's not in any real danger right now. And what's happening is f4 has to be played. If f4 is not played, knight to h2 is just a senseless move. What was the point of it? To regroup to g2, I suppose? Or g4, I suppose? There's not really a justification for it. The purpose of this move was to play f4, taking away the e-pawn and preventing the black knight from getting f4 one day. So black comes up with a new plan. He can recycle his knight around this way. He's just simply threatening to play knight to e6 right now. So again, f4 is basically almost forced here, I think. Sparty says, "Do you think Fabi's going to be murdered this match?" Well, it could be, but he sure fended off an impossible position today. I would call it a miracle. It was a miracle how he survived this. So f4, pawn takes, rook takes. Rook takes is quite important. As Rufus and Doofus comes in with a bit. What's up, Rufus? Rufus, love to hear your comments on the game. We're taking a look at it right now. Magnus was absolutely destroying Fabi, and with literally seconds on his clock, Fabi came up with a long series of absolutely brilliant defensive moves and cleanly held the draw. Very interesting game. So this move was a total shocker. I don't think anybody expected this move, bishop to e6, because what a strange idea. Think about what's happened here the last couple of moves. Knight to f8, followed by bishop to e6. But again, remember, Carlsen's not really big on putting his pieces on aggressive squares where they could potentially be beaten off. I know that's not a very good saying. I sound like Danny Wrench, blowing himself. He's blown himself a bunch of rook endings. And I'm talking about beaten off attacks. But but he's not in any rush to put his knight on like d4 or something, okay? He's not in any big rush to do that because he knows that knight to f3 and stuff coming. Why give up his beautiful piece for some crummy knight on h2? He doesn't want to do that. So he's going to take his time and he's going to regroup that knight to a square where it's not so easy to fend off. So he plays bishop to e6. Once again, look at this position. Never once for a single move in this game has a single solitary piece of Magnus's been in any danger of any kind whatsoever. Purely from the sides and using the influence of his pawns, Magnus is building an overwhelming position with the black pieces without ever being in any danger. This is sorcery. This is sorcery like only Magnus can do. Really want to read these comments, so just give me a quick second. Watched for 7 hours and I'm burnt out, but you'll enjoy my translation of the game from chess nerd to jock speak. Cool. Yeah, I watched the whole thing too, man. Hey, Perpetual Stalemate, how you doing, man? Good morning. All right, gents, been sitting in front of the computer since 8 a.m. I'm going to take a break. Gotcha, Pickle Pawn. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for those biddies, man. Let me know how things are going with your computer. Hopefully you get those situations solved. I don't know if you're on my Discord or not, but if you're on my Discord, I got a tech channel, and you can talk to Kingly and Schwobi and some of those guys might be able to help you out. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for the well wishes, and we'll see you soon, Pickle. Magnus Carlsen deferred the opening kickoff until the second half and let Fabi have white the first game. Fabi started off okay and then fumbled the ball deep in his own territory, and Magnus recovered. After an amazing goal line stance by Fabi, where Magnus had 3 drop passes in the end zone and missed the chip shot field goal, Fabi got a few more yards and then punted Magnus. Will start on his own 20 tomorrow morning for round 2 in a scoreless match so far. Very nice, very nicely written. I like that goal line stance. That's a brilliant analogy. Very much what happened. Fabi looked bad blowing his first possession, but managed to keep Magnus from capitalizing and from putting any points on the board. Now tomorrow morning we'll have to see if Magnus can get a drive going, score the first points of the match. Well said. Quinn says, I love Carlsen's placement of the bishop. I mean, it's quite brilliant. And now the Black Knight has the possibility of both g6 and d7. as avenues to move forward. I don't know where he wants that knight to go yet. I guess judging by his play, he still wants to get to f4. After watching this game, can I play in the Magnus style? I mean, I can always try to emulate him, but no, nobody can play like Magnus. Yeah, Grizzchuck. Yeah, I'm pretty beat myself. My throat's pretty sore. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this. Yeah, Grizzchuck is a monster. Did anyone think he was way underdeveloped? No, I thought he was playing very hyper modern. I thought he was just squeezing his opponent like a python without ever having any of his pieces in any danger. Look at the placement. Both of White's knights are in trouble. And this was happening since, let's go back to here. Yeah, like, you know, look at this position. The knights are both totally out of play. The knight on c3 doesn't have good prospects either, because any exchange that takes place on f4 is going to expose the b pawn to the bishop. So both of these knights are already having troubles, and we're only 10 moves into the game. So in this position, the rook comes back to f2, guards against any possible blocks here. If black wanted to play bishop to d5 and get rid of white's bishop, he could, but why give up that beautiful bishop? Oops, let's put this on pause here. Why give up that beautiful bishop for this crummy bishop on d3? Once again, Carlsen doesn't like to put his pieces on squares where they can be taken with tempo. He doesn't want to allow any possibilities like here and then allowing the knight to get back into the game and start attacking. But what's really cool about bishop to e6 is it guards the f7 pawn. It guards the f7 pawn from any cheapo attacks. So again, no tempo for white, because now this pawn is guarded. No way to attack this bishop on e6. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful move. White had to lose time with knight to h2 to get any play going, which means black was fine. Yeah. I mean, I was telling people, Sparry, that because I've played the Rosarimo before myself, my instinct in this position was to play a4. Because it puts a lock on the queen side temporarily. It even threatens to continue to push forward and gain more space on the queen side, but it puts a temporary lock on the queen side. And it reserves the right to choose what you want to do with this knight, depending on black's next move. So it's giving black that extra chance to... So if black would have continued with knight to f8, then maybe now you can make a decision as to where you want to go. Maybe it might be possible to play... I don't know if knight to g5 is playable. But at the very least, I feel like you've at least reserved judgment on this pawn push. So I feel like it's a little sneakier. I don't know if Magnus is going to play bishop e6 again in this line. But I just like the idea, and it played into the game later on. This is my standard move, just because I'm familiar with these kinds of positions. Like maybe after knight here, you just simply push this pawn. Again, it's just I'm familiar with the Rosalimos because I used to play this for years. So I've always had really good success at messing up black's pawn structures, and I just feel like this is the way to go. And the computer agrees with me that that's a playable move. There's a bunch of playable moves for white. Anyways, that's not what was played. We had bishop to e6, rook back to f2, and then comes the move h6. So now this move knight to g4 seems really wasted. There's no real prospects of doing that. Black's not going to castle on the king side here anymore. If anything, he's going to play queen d6 and castle on the queen side. But the white black king is not in any danger, so he doesn't even have to do that. Did he castle? I think he did castle. I think black did castle. He castled and then later played his king to b7 and a6. He did have balls to play the Sicilian. I wonder if that was a statement. That's interesting. Yeah, I've seen Caruana and Carlsen play Gyoko pianos and Lopez positions before, both of them. And they can transpose, actually. Why play for black d4 for black? Because black gets an entry point from the black queen on the diagonal. d4 to g1, pinning the white rook could be a good deal. Yeah, if you're talking about like when I was mentioning the bishop, yeah. Again, I don't like putting the piece there. I don't even really think that the knight necessarily belongs there. Although I think that putting that knight there is a great thing. I think having all that extra space in that long pawn chain is really good for black. But black doesn't want to have this target here. I think black has always been thinking that he was either going to play g6 and knight to g6 and knight to f4, or possibly knight to d7 with the intention of playing knight to e5. But one of these squares is probably where that knight's going to end up. Not on d4. He's already got this square. Does black. There's no way for white to push d4, which would be standard in these lines, and I would have played d4 a long time ago for exactly these kind of reasons. So queen to d2, g5, so sure enough he plays that. Rook a to f1, and now this move, queen to d7. I still feel like knight to g6 is already playable here. And I also think that queen to d7 is another possibility. Queen to d7, trying to stop the knight from getting in here. The reason for queen to d6 is very simple. He wants to castle, and he's going to develop his knight and continue on his movement towards here. He might even play bishop to e5, threatening to come into the g3 square. Hey, what's up, Gary Fang? He says, lucky escape for Caruana. It's funny that it's cool to hear all the different, opinions on how that went down. Hey, Frankie, how you doing? Frankel? Long time no see, man. Good to have you on the Trout Show. Take a look at the game from the World Championship today. Fabiano Caruana is white. Magnus Carlsen is black. What is the evaluation with bishop takes c3, doubling the pawns? Asks RPD. Definitely that's not the right way to go, and I'll tell you the main reason why. First of all, you're not going to double the pawns. Are you talking about like way back here? Like this position here instead of like this? Yeah, definitely that's not the right way to go. This bishop is killing this knight right now. It has no legitimate squares. This knight can't just simply regroup because of, this knight can't simply regroup because of just bishop takes, right? So this knight is kind of static. It doesn't really have any place to go. So definitely you don't want to take that, allowing the pawn takes back. And now you can definitely start running this pawn up the board. c5 is going to be a weakness. You can even now play the move d4. And these pawns are going to fall very quickly. d4 and d5, things are going to start getting very ugly. Queen to f3, it's going to start getting very, very ugly very quickly. And if we turn on Mr. Silicon, let's see what Mr. Silicon has to say. It now suggests that white is up by more than a pawn here, just over the course of one move. Black has lost a key attacking piece and several really good squares that he could have put it on. And white has new options available for attacking, for aggressing black. Really, these double pawns are of no consequence. They can actually be quite strong in supporting pushes in the center. Okay, so h6, queen to d2, g5, rook over, queen to d6, making room to castle, knight to g4 anyways. I mean, I'm not really sold on this move. Is that what the computer recommends? The computer doesn't really... The computer's still suggesting my move a4. See, Fabi didn't want to get into like messing up these pawns over here and opening things up. So he's just trying to go for a blockade right now. He doesn't mind to give up the double pawns in exchange for the strong bishop on e6. It's going to be more difficult now to protect the f-pawn. So that's the reason why he's playing that move. I'm just not really sold on this move. And somewhere around here, I feel like white started getting into some serious trouble. Once again, look at this position. Not a single piece on the entire black board is under any serious attack. Nothing. I mean, I suppose the g-pawn and the f-pawn are under attack, but who cares? They're protected. Black has no pressure on any of his pieces, and he's completely dominating this game. It is sorcery. It is sorcery by Magnus Carlsen. Later on, the dark squared bishop was a monster indeed, and should have been the end of the game. The game should have ended because of this move b3, which you'll see coming up, which I hated, but all the commentators seem to like it. What's up, D-Jal? Welcome, welcome. He's got some cat emotes up there. I think those are Joseph Whale emotes. Haven't seen those in a while. Vertwitch really not happy with Fabi's play today. Vertwitch definitely not happy with the way things went down today. I think we'll see more. I think you'll see some home cooking by Fabiano before this match is over. Plenty of it. So don't worry about that. But yeah, Rufus, right? Sorcery, I tell you. But you will see some defensive sorcery from Fabiano. Oh, don't you worry. This game is not over, folks. And let's just for fun, let's throw on Mr. Silicon for a quick second, okay? Mr. Silicon still suggests that it's, Black's advantage is, okay, if he plays castling, he's still got some advantage, okay? But it's not like a winning game, like 8/10 of a pawn. What's that, guys? Even one pawn, Carlsen was up a pawn in the end game. It was a dead draw for 40 moves. So pawn's not the end of the world, okay? Black has a small advantage here with perfect play. So instead, he does castle, and then comes this move, knight to f6. This knight has no prospects at all. This is my opinion. And I did not like knight to g4, and as soon as it was played, I said that knight doesn't have any prospects. That's what I said in my Discord. Knight to f6 was the only move. So Black continues with knight to d7. And again, he didn't have to play that, but why not? Why not get rid of that knight? And you might think, well, why did that knight go to f8? All of these plans of going to f4. How could Black now play a move like this? Why not play knight to g6 or something like that? The advantage is already breaking through. The g3 pawn is extremely weak. The g pawn push is a possibility. f5 could be a possibility. A rook coming to g8 is a possibility. White already has a number of critical issues in this position, and most importantly, this bishop is going to come to e5, and things are going to get so ugly very quickly for White. Things are falling apart. Things are falling apart here. So he's not afraid to exchange that. And if White were to take that, by the way, after rook takes, let's say, b3 is a crap move. I don't care what the computer says. It's a crap move. I'll play it if the computer wants it, but it's garbage. Okay, and then now we're looking at rook to g8. And again, here you can see the power of these pieces coming down. The bishop's going to come to e5. The g-pawn push is going to come in. If the move g4 takes place, he'll just play h5, for example. There's no way to stop Black from cracking this position open. And there are a lot of heavy pieces. The two bishops, the two rooks, and the queens. All the powerful attacking long-range pieces are still on the board. Not a single one of them is under attack. Not one of them, folks. So instead, after the knight to d7, White plays the move knight to h5. It took me a while, but I did suggest this move during the live game. And my idea was to protect it with g4. I have a book that I'm writing. I keep mentioning it. I should stop mentioning it because it's probably never going to get finished, because I just got too many things on the go. But I do have a section in there that specifically deals with the power of a knight outpost on the h-file or on the a-file. It's underestimated a lot of time, but this is a knight outpost. The reason why I call this a knight outpost is because, for those of you who are new to chess, there's no pawn that can attack this knight on that square. So this knight can only be attacked with pieces. So there's literally only two pieces on the board, if I can get g4 in, that can ever attack this knight, legitimately. That can ever chase this knight from that square. There are no pawns, and none of the other pieces are good enough. The bishop can't do it, and the queen and the rook would just be a sacrifice. So this knight is not so terribly bad. The problem is that if it ever disappears, the game is going to be over because Black is going to crack through. And so only afterwards, when Black played the move bishop to e5, which I also expected, and then g4, only now is it suggested this strong move of f6, which I had totally missed. The purpose of f6 is very simple. He's going to move his bishop back to f7, yoink that piece, and then continue with his rook to g8 and pushing the g-pawn plan. If the knight comes back, which it can't, then the h-pawn would push at some point in time. So, the move b3 was played, which I hate. I absolutely hate this move. Hey, Brooklyn Ross in the house. What's up, man? Oh, God. Here. Oh, okay, you're talking about the Draj players, boring players RPD? Thank goodness. Because he said Anish Giri. Anish Giri is not a guy I would want to win the World Championship. Franco says he didn't have a chance to play aggressive. He's talking about Fabi, I assume. What would I do about h5? I mean, I wasn't sure on the spot what to do. I thought I was going to have to remaneuver my knight, which I thought was possible because of the closed nature of the position. Keep in mind, this f6 pawn is carefully guarded. It's carefully guarded here right now by the bishop and the knight. So I felt like I had the time to do that, but I might have to play rook g8 first. I wasn't sure what was going to happen here. RPG is going to go check out Canty. That's cool, man. I understand. There's a lot of good guys giving some commentary today. D-Gel Anon says, I think Carolina did okay. First game, he managed to survive regardless of starting colors and lives to play another day. I tend to agree with that. I thought he played, he sure didn't get much out of this opening. This opening's already a big problem for him here. This looks one for black, I know, right, Sparry? DJ Anon says I'm very quiet. It's probably just the microphone. I'll try to speak more towards the microphone. I have a really ghetto setup today, so I've got the volume turned up a little bit, but I'm pretty far away from the microphone, and especially when I lean back in my chair, it's really, really hard to hear. So you might have to turn up your volume a little bit, and I'll try to speak a little bit more into the microphone here. So f6, I just feel like the game's already almost over. Like, just think about this, folks. We're 20 moves into the game, and white is on the verge of being completely busted in this position already, with black never having had a single one of his pieces ever under attack. So sure enough, bishop to f7, and this move is beautiful. This move is so elegant. Knight to d1. This is just, wow. Who comes up with a move like this? And you'll see in a couple of moves what his plan was. A beginner would look at this move and think, what the heck are you doing? You're moving your knight back to a square. Where is it even going to go to? These squares that it could go to towards the king side for defense are covered by pieces. You're giving a possibility for black to just double your pawns and play that breaking G move anyways, which is just what we said he was going to do. And sure enough, that's probably a winning line. But white had a specific idea in mind why he played this. And watch the magical journey this knight's going to go on. Just keep an eye on this knight on d1, guys. If you miss the game, you're going to see some magic here. You'll see in a minute why he played that move. Oh, I don't think you're a beginner, Quinn, but yeah, it's. I don't think any of us sensibly would play a move like that. That's a real Fabi move. That's a 2800 caliber move right there. He says that the knight can go to f5 to defend on f2. That would definitely be a nice square if he could get there safely. And it definitely poses some questions to black. And here black played a move that was absolutely stunning. This is just like two heavyweights just kapow, smash, just punching each other with all of their guts. Look at this move. Knight to f8. Knight to f8. Hanging his f-pawn on purpose with a backwards knight move, guys. Magnus Carlsen. Absolutely brilliant move. And I think he got bored. I honestly think he was bored and played a little colorfully after this and threw his advantage away right back. This move is basically winning. So here's the idea. Here's the idea, guys. If knight takes pawn, white is going to play the move bishop to g6. And look at the knight on f6. The knight on f6 doesn't have any squares to go to. It has to go back to the h5 square anyways. So we're going to get this move in anyways, this knight move in that we wanted in the first place, followed by taking and playing here. But now we haven't been forced to take this yet. And there's also the possibility that maybe he might be able to, like, I don't know, maybe he might even, like, regroup this knight in a different way. I don't know. But I think his plan was just to play here and hop into this square. And this knight is going to be forced back to the square anyways. Take a look at the analysis engine, okay? Let's take a look at this for a second. Let's just let it settle down, make sure it's got the right move. So on bishop to g6, let's say, for example, that the knight just comes back to h5. Now comes knight to e6, and let's say, whatever, a3. Let's just say he doesn't go crazy and start sacking stuff. Now comes rook h to g8. And let's try this knight to f6 just for fun. We're going to get rook to g7, and the move h5 is going to come. If the move h5 doesn't come, it's because the knight was still there, which we're going to chop and then play g5. All of this is forced. And once again, folks, no piece of black's is under attack. The only attack came on knight to f6, where black simply calmly moves his rook up. Nothing is under attack of black's. And this position is borderline winning. But here's what actually happened, guys. Fabi went into a long think here, and he finally decided to take that pawn. And as we talked about, guys, in the commentary of the games that we looked at, this is the style of Fabiano. This is the style, is to go ahead and grab that extra pawn and hold on to it with grim death. He has a fundamentally sound position. He's played the move b3. The purpose was to prevent a c4 pawn push. So he has a very strong structure on the white squares. He has open squares for his rooks. He has two rooks down the f-file. And so he is counting on his stodgy pawn structure to give him a chance to make some sort of a fortress and just sort of hold this position. And if he can hold it up a pawn, he might even win it. So Magnus plays the move knight to e6. Let's take a look at what you guys are talking in the chat here. Knight to d4, yeah. Well, we've talked about knight to d4. I think the reason why he didn't end up playing knight to d4, Brooklyn, is just because Magnus doesn't like to keep his pieces on squares where they can be attacked, unless there's a real, like, a valid point. So he's willing to go to the f4 square. The reason is because he wants white to take, so he can take back with his g-pawn, move a rook over to g8, and then push his h-pawn. He wants to open up these pawns like a can of worms, if he can. That's what he wants. He wants an open line here or here. If black could do that, he would be feeling really good about his position right now. With the bishop and the queen battering around like this, that's why I think he's comfortable going to the f4 square. If he goes to the d4 square, I think taking is going to be... probably this bishop is not worth as much as that knight right now in the closed position. And the pawn's going to take back. Black's going to have a really strong pawn chain here. But as far as like an area to try to break through, there's still some work to be done. The only file that's going to be open is the f-file, and white has two rooks on there. Guarded by a whole bunch of pieces. Guarded by the queen, the king, the bishop, and the knight. All guarding the f2 square. So it's going to be really difficult for black to break through on the f-file. He's going to have to find another way. That's why he's trying to either open the g or the h-file if he can. That's why he went into this kooky line in the first place. Because he didn't have to do that. He could have just done bishop takes, pawn takes, and then he could have played knight back to here. And if we stick this in the analysis engine, let's see what it says. So it agrees that black is still doing better, but here the evaluation is like up a pawn. And I think here's the problem, guys. Let's see what he does. Here's the line that I was thinking of, either rook to f5 or maybe rook to g2 is safer. And now you're going to see why this position took place with the knight on d1. Now the knight is going to come to f2, and look at this. It hops into the stupid g4 square. It hops into g4, guys, to blockade the position so that the g file doesn't get opened up. That was the point of knight to d1. Can you believe that Fabiano saw this way back here in this position? Here, boom, knight to d1. This is glorious. This is glorious Fabiano defensive chess. And you might think that it's boring or it's weird, but this is beautiful, beautiful chess. He saw this from a mile away. He knew this file was going to get opened up, and he was going to have to blockade on the G file. Just checking out your comments here, guys. The computer suggested an exchange jack with rook takes f6 instead. Oh yeah, that's very possible. I'm going to show you guys that either. That's also another thing that's in my book, and I mentioned that in my Discord as well, is the concept of having a minor pieceless ending with rooks on the board where you got a rook against a minor piece. That ain't a win, brother. A rook against a knight or a rook against a bishop in an otherwise equal position with lots of like rich pawn and king possibilities, that ain't a win, man. Because that bishop or knight can be a blockade, and the rook can never take it. You don't have any minor pieces, so you can't contest that small piece. It looks like a win, but brother, it ain't a win. And I could show you a million examples like this. Maybe not a million. I could show you 100 examples like this. So I'm not surprised that that was a possibility, and I'll show you another sacrifice there was later on. There was another one on f4. B3 was necessary so the knight could move. I disagree, Sparry. I think the knight could have moved. I don't think bishop takes b2 was a good move because of c3. I think white would have been very happy with that position, forcing like bishop to a3, and there goes your powerful bishop. If it's not trapped, it's at least completely out of the play. That was well worth giving up a pawn. So I disagree that b3 was necessary. I think the purpose of b3 was to stop the move c4, which was not necessary, but did turn out to be valuable. But I still feel that the game should have ended on one of these two squares, b2 or c3. That's where the game should have ended and would have ended if Magnus would have played this correctly. Oh, you were talking about Fabiano playing d4? I'd have to take a look again at what position that was, Brooklyn. But without the move c3, it's going to be difficult to get that d4 in. There's just too much stuff on that square. And you're going to isolate your e-pawn once he takes it. No, I don't think that d4 was ever going to be playable. It would have sure been nice. I think the whole world was waiting for a nice appearance from Fabianos as Vertwitch, but it never happened. On the contrary, we just saw one player today putting the hard work. For me, chess has to have no engine assistance. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Vertwitch. I'm not super big on the engines either, but it's part of the modern world, so. And I'm not as down on Fabi's performance today as what you are. I understand why you feel like that, but I thought he played really well. Yeah, no, I didn't like b3 because there's major problems for black on the dark squares here. And I don't think that this is the right approach. I think a4 was the right approach. Preventing b4 and possibly threatening a4 so that you can get an extra attack on the c5 and trying to pin black's pieces down onto that square. So no, I did not think that b3 was the correct move. I don't like that move at all. And white's position is bad here. Losing. He's losing. Brooklyn Raw, man. That's cool. Hey, those tactics puzzles are paying off for you guys, man. That's really cool that you guys are spotting moves from world championships, from world championship matches. Very, very well done, man. I'm really happy to hear you guys are watching and enjoying these games, man. I thought he did play extremely well. I thought he played very, very well today, defensively. But he was getting smoked in this particular position, and Magnus should have won this game easily. And once again, no pieces of blacks under attack. Just think about that, guys. So So the knight goes back. Let's take a look at how this finished off. Knight takes. Knight to e6 is an inaccuracy. Again, I feel like Magnus is getting fancy here. There's a couple of things. Maybe what Fabi did was a little bit better. Whoops, let's turn this off for a minute. Maybe what Fabi did was better with the knight move. But knight to d7 is really an annoying move. I think he has to play bishop to f4. So here's the problem: if he takes this, that he's going to take this bishop. That's just kind of what I thought was going to happen here. And I thought maybe Magnus missed this, but apparently he didn't. I wish this computer would turn off. So knight to h5 was played. Bishop takes, g takes, knight to f4. Bishop takes, pawn takes. This is the only chance. You might wonder why he doesn't take the bishop, attacking the queen. For one thing, here's where a possible sacrifice could take place. Rook takes bishop. Pawn takes and queen takes. And here we have an example, folks, of the knight versus the rook. There are no more minor pieces left for black on the board. So you might think, well, black's got an exchange. Black doesn't really have an exchange here. Theoretically, black doesn't have anything. White has a knight and 2 pawns. But even if you could somehow get a pawn or two, this knight's just going to plop itself on this nice juicy white square right here on f5. Or here, or here. All of these squares are blockading squares that knight can reach easily. And black can never take it unless he wants to sacrifice his piece back. There is no pawn on the board, and there's no minor piece on the board that can attack it. That's the reason why, in and of itself, that position is not winning for black. And check it out. When we put it on the analysis, I bet you it's going to say, there you go, boom, draw. Dead draw, folks. No minor pieces, watch out. I don't care if you've got a rook versus a knight or a rook versus a bishop. I don't care if you have 2 rooks versus 2 bishops, and all of the pawns are equal, and the pawns are kind of safe and guarded by the bishops and the king. The 2 bishops are either a draw, or if you want to keep pressing for a win, you're probably going to lose that game. You might not believe me, but it's a fact, folks. No minor pieces, watch out. You got to have a minor piece on the board when your opponent has one, or you're going to be in big trouble. So this line is already pretty good for white. Alright, so let's go back a couple of moves. Thank you guys all for joining me on the Trout Show. Can't believe anybody's here hanging around and watching. It's really cool of you guys. There's much better players out there than me, but I hope you guys are getting something out of this analysis. It was a lot of fun for me. It was really fun to have you guys hanging around and watching the games and stuff, so this has been a lot of fun. So the pawn takes and the rook comes to g2. Once again, folks, rook takes pawn is the correct move. And once again, the computer's going on. Let's try to get that off. Once again, that's the better move. Instead, he plays the move rook to g2. This move is losing, believe it or not. I know it's hard to believe. Rook g2 loses. Because now black finally gets what he wanted all of this time, which is to stick a rook on the g-file. He's finally done it. He's broken through. So having played the slightly inaccurate move knight to e6 instead of bishop to g6, white has achieved the second winning position. Or black has achieved the second winning position. So he plays the move rook to g8. And Fabi immediately played queen to e2. He was quite low on time here, folks. Very, very low. I think he just had a few more minutes left. Engine gives the line is good for black. Which line is that? The rook takes pawn? Is that what you're talking about, Sparry? So here you mean like a rook takes pawn, it gives a line is good for black? I strongly disagree. I believe this is an absolute dead draw. Rook takes f4, dead draw. Now, I don't know that I have the skills to prove it. Certainly not against Magnus or Fabi, probably not even against you, but it is a dead draw, is my opinion. And given enough time, I could probably demonstrate it. Given unlimited time, I think I could demonstrate it. Thanks, Ray Clay. So you're saying if I do rook takes here, this is an advantage for black. So let's turn on the engine for a quick second. So it suggests rook takes bishop takes, and queen takes. Let's let it sit for a second. Dead draw. Dead draw. And again, you don't need the evaluation. Never mind the evaluation, guys. Let's just focus on the actual position. What is black going to do if I stick my knight on one of these 3 squares? And just maneuver around forever. Even if you want to trade off a set of rooks, that's okay. Go ahead and set off a trade of rooks. As long as you don't start scooping up all of my pawns over here, as long as I don't lose these pawns, I'm going to be okay. I'm not even worried about these pawns at all. But I'm just going to stick my knight on one of these squares, probably even just on g4, because it's a beautiful outpost. Keep my rook there, and if you want to exchange, that's fine. I'll exchange and move my king to e2, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do as black? How are you ever going to make any progress? You can't do anything because the rook can't penetrate, because you can't sacrifice for the knight. So if anything, your clunky rook, which can't move on diagonals, is actually stuck in a passive position, because you have to defend your pawns from like straight lines. So the knight is more maneuverable than the rook in these positions. It's a dead draw. Instead, rook to g2, rook to g8, queen to e2 was played instantly. Rook takes, queen takes. I kind of was thinking like queen to f6 maybe in this position, and I thought maybe like I don't know, like I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do here. But the move queen to e6 was played. The intention of playing rook to g8. I learned to be really cautious as I got better playing the exchange upside. That's my only point. What I'm trying to say is that don't just assume that because you're up material in that position that you're winning. Watch out. If you don't have minor pieces on the board, be very careful when your opponent has minor pieces, because you don't have anything to get rid of them. The only thing you can do is pawns, or like somehow try to trap them in a corner. Like if they're just off in no man's land, then sure, you can just corral them, right? But if they're like in a normal, sensible, in an otherwise normal, respectable looking position where things are basically covered, a minor piece versus a rook in and of itself is probably going to be good enough to draw, or at least don't count on the win. Don't think that it's an automatic win. And I'm going to show you guys some examples, because I'm going to one day I'm going to get that book together. I'm working on it slowly. It's a lot of like lines, and I lost all of my beautiful game examples from my like real life games and games that I collected over the years, so I got to go find them all over again, because I had all my stuff lost in Ottawa there a couple of years ago. So that sucks. So there's a lot of like just research involved and stuff, but don't worry, it's coming, guys. And I'm going to demonstrate to you how the minor piece versus the rook is very practical. Okay, so let's continue on. So the knight comes to f2. Once again, we see this plan initiated way back when white played the move knight back to d1. So knight to f2, rook to g8, knight to g4. And this move was totally over my head. I totally missed this. And black always had this intention. What a beautiful move by Magnus Carlsen. So he's going to pick up that h-pawn. It's not necessarily the end of the game in and of itself. But, like, where is this bloody king supposed to go? I kept trying to make, like, the pawn push work. There was a lot of stuff I tried to make work here, but I think Magnus's move is just really strong. Let's turn on the computer again for one more quick second. Black winning in numerous lines, or at least better, clearly better in numerous lines, okay? And then we're going to get in the move queen to f3. Queen takes pawn, king to f2. My instincts would tell me to make the move king to h2, guarding my pawn. But this is a much stronger move. King to f2 is a much, much stronger defensive move. Getting the king to start running over towards the queen side while you still can't. So the king goes to f2, but this is still dead lost. The bishop goes back to c7. This is an exquisite move. I was looking at moves like bishop to d5, or possibly a preemptive bishop to c3. Maybe I was going to try to sacrifice here, or whatever else, but black's got a different plan. When he plays bishop to c7, here's his plan. He wants to play queen to g5, and then he's going to push his h-pawn. And then he's just going to start dominating down the g-file, like starting on g3. So that's his plan. Here, followed by h5, maybe even h4, and then the check on g4, on g3. And he's penetrating. So that's why he took away the target on e5. If you guys are still with me? Okay, so we got this situation. So yeah, this is just this is lost. This is lost for White. He's got to run away. But look at these. Watch these. Now at this point in time, guys, Fabiano Caruana had literally seconds left on his clock. A couple of times he came down to single-digit seconds on his clock, and every move that he makes, he gets an extra 30-second increment. So he was playing these moves within seconds against Magnus Carlsen. Imagine trying to defend this position against world champion Magnus Carlsen with seconds left on your clock. It is incredible. So queen to g5 is played. He does have that plan to push his h-pawn. Knight to h2. Grandmaster Robert Hess called this move desperation by White. Literally played with like 2 seconds left on the board. H5 anyways. The reason for h5, I think, is he doesn't want to allow queen to g4. Check. He doesn't want to allow that, followed by queen takes and knight takes. There's still a minor piece on the board, but it's a black squared bishop. So this knight is going to be able to get a powerful outpost. So it's not going to work either. He doesn't want to allow that, so he plays this move h5. I think it's a nice technical accuracy, although there might have been other good moves. Rook to h2, a beautiful move defensively. Queen to g1, and basically he's just threatening to play, for example, queen to c1 or queen to b1. And that's the end of the show, guys. That's the end of the show. He's going to play rook to g1, and he's going to take that c-pawn, and then he's just going to start scooping up the whole queen side, and that's the end of the game. That's almost to the point that Fabi should resign there. E5, let me see here. No, not quite yet. Not quite yet, because on e5, I'm simply going to play the move queen to c1. So this is still going to be a loss here. e5 is not going to work in this situation. There's no check on this c6 square, which is the reason for playing e5. That's not quite going to work yet, but there does come a time shortly. Queen to g1, first, this beautiful move. Knight to f1, my favorite move of the game for Fabi. Yes! Knight to f1. Boy, this is beautiful, guys. I know, it's not, your fancy queen sacks. I get it. I understand not everybody's into the style. I'm a tactician myself. I don't like boring chess. I'm constantly complaining about boring players or players playing one-move tactics on my stream. I hate boring chess players. This move is not boring. This move is beautiful. It's a stunning move. Cutting off the queen, guarding the g3 square. And now this threat is coming, and it's more dangerous now, this move e5. Because if this queen can get buzzing around, there's chances for a draw. Here is where black made a fatal mistake, I think. Black played the move h4. And if you are going to play the move h4, it's got to be because you want to move your rook down to g6. But what instead probably he should just do, I know it's not fun again. I feel like Magnus is getting bored. He doesn't want to play the obvious moves, and he's getting fancy. Simply queen to g7 wins on the spot. There is nothing to stop this. There's nothing to stop this. If he plays king to here, probably I'm still just going to go ahead and do this one first. And now at my leisure, I'm going to play bishop to e5. And there's no way to stop me from snatching this c-pawn. The game's over. It really is. And let's take a look at the computer, because there's other lines as well here. Like, maybe he could play the bishop move already. He might even be able to play rook g3 now. It suggests queen to g5, queen to g6. Wow. I'm not sure why it likes queen to g5. Queen to g5 and queen to g6, it also says is winning. White is up 2.29 pawns in this position after queen to g7. It suggests knight to d2. And then king to b7, that's just a precautionary move to guard against the threat of e5. And then at his leisure, the queen is just going to come in and start scooping these pawns. There's nothing that White can do. This game is over, folks. The game is over. Instead, he pushes this pawn, h4. This is an inaccuracy. This is the kind of a move that Magnus will play that Fabi will not. It's a slightly aggressive move that's not necessary. It doesn't leave a target, so he's not going to lose tempo on it. But it's an unnecessarily exquisite or fancy move that's not making his position better. Am I a boring chess player, Bertrout? No, I don't find you a boring chess player at all, Bertwitch. No, I don't. I wouldn't say that. I don't know. I wouldn't want to call out any names or anything like that. But there's a few players that some of whom are very strong, who I find boring. Either they purposely play dull openings all the time, or they only play cheapo tactics and like weird gambit lines and stuff like that. But no, I don't find you a boring player at all. And that's what I mean when I say boring. I mean, I like to see originality. I like to see creativity. Knight to F1 is a beautiful move. Incredibly creative. It doesn't matter whether it's defensive or aggressive. The intelligence that goes into this move is stunning. And it ultimately wins him the game. This game should have been over right now on Queen of G7. Queen of G7 just threatening to come into the B2 square, and Fabi should resign with the queen on B2 exactly where that pawn pushed from. That horrible pawn that I said from the very beginning that white should lose on one of these two squares, either B2 or C3. That's where the game should end. Boom. Too weak. And I never liked that move. But instead he finds himself in this position. The king goes over to D2. Okay, so now he's one move closer, so he's taken away at least the C1 square temporarily from the black queen. King to B7, so now he is going to protect this. Maybe in this line here, maybe this is the position. No, still not really. I don't know. Maybe this is a position where E5 is playable. E5 might be playable now here. The idea is that if the bishop takes the pawn, then I've got queen takes C6. So this move is kind of interesting, and the threat is just to simply take the F pawn. So E5 might be playable now. Rufus says now rook to G6. After the king move, yeah, I agree. Rook to G6. If that wasn't his plan, why did he play H4? So after knight takes and pawn takes, rook to here. I'm not sure. Does he just play like... I'm not sure. Maybe he plays queen at A1? Maybe the computer can give me some assistance here. I feel like queen at A1 or B1. And this game is over. He could also just simply play queen to H1 and scoop up the pawn as well. The check's not very dangerous. I'm just going to go to B7. Let's just see that for a quick second. Let's just see if that's the line that the computer gives. The computer's not really sold on rook to G6. But let's take a look at it anyways. Rook to G6. Knight takes, H takes. Rook to G2, and it's suggesting queen to... okay. Queen to A1, but then now he's got this E5 move again. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Wow. Queen at... Oh, wow. E5 is a really beautiful move here. The queen's going to take this pawn over here, and he's just going to try to blockade these two pawns. That's pretty beautiful. I did not see that line. It's recommending king to B7 still. So king to B7, and then we've got C3. So now he is preparing D4. He's also taking away this D4 square so that if necessary he can move this rook and he doesn't have to worry about the queen going to D4 anymore. Again, maybe this rook move, I'm thinking. So he plays bishop to E5, king over to C2. Queen finally goes back to G7, but it's too late. The knight goes back to H2. Look at this. Just remember, folks, this was the knight that started on B1. It went from B1 to C3 to D1 to F2 to G4 to H2, F1, and back again to H2. Come on, guys. You got to respect that, man. You have got to respect that. You got to respect that against none other than Magnus Carlsen. You got to appreciate that. Okay, so knight to H2. The bishop takes the pawn, but that's not really of any consequence right now. Queen takes F5. Not that he cares so much about this pawn. The important thing is that he wants to get the check on F7 and swap off queens. He's got to get rid of that queen now. And it looks like this king has survived. So bishop to D4, it's possible that maybe bishop to E5 was a little bit stronger. The reason I like this move is now on queen to F7, king to A6. queen takes and rook takes, there's a threat of rook to g3 followed by taking this pawn. The rook can't leave the defense of that knight right now, so probably he has to play something like here, and then maybe after this move or something like that. And maybe like there's ways that, I don't know. Maybe there's ways that he can sack here one day and try to get in or something. I don't know. Maybe it's still not good enough. But anyways, that was the line that I thought was interesting. He ends up playing bishop to d4 instead, directly attacking the rook. And now what follows here is a long forcing line. Black didn't have to go into this, but I don't think he had anything better. And it's probably this is already a draw. Let's just give the computer just a second to warm up, and it finds it right away. Let's give the computer a second to deduce the situation. First of all, I have to warn you guys that the computer in the endgame, you might think that with less pieces on the board, the computer will be even stronger, but it's not the case. It's actually weaker. And a lot of times the computer will give an evaluation and say one side is better or the other, just based on all of the different parameters, but it doesn't understand that there's a blockade in place. And this happens really, really frequently. The weakness of the computer is actually the endgame, not the opening, believe it or not. Breaking it down, live Friday night stream. Thanks, Ray Clay. Very twitching you guys up. Appreciate you guys throwing those fish up in the air. What is up, folks, with some fish? We're almost done this game. And then we'll have a little shoot the breeze time, maybe a couple of games. So we got bishop to d4. Let's see how this game finishes off. So the queen does check. The king goes to a6. Queen takes, rook to e2, and rook to g3. Basically all a forcing line. So the move knight to g4 is played, rook takes, and e5, which was White's plan. So this pawn is almost unstoppable now. There's only one possible way to stop it. The bishop can't even go to f6 because the knight covers that square. If the rook just comes over to here, I'm just going to push this pawn again. Rook takes, I will push the pawn again. Rook back, I'm going to push the pawn again, and I'm winning a rook for a knight and a pawn. That's going to be enough. This pawn will not succeed. So a very easy draw. So the pawn push, the rook comes over to f3. The pawn push again, rook to f8. This is all forced. The pawn push, rook to e8. Every one of these moves was forced. It was the only way to stop this pawn. And now comes the move knight to h6. The threat is he's going to play to his knight to f5 and then to, for example, g7 or possibly d6. And so he's going to win a piece. So the move is h3, knight, and then followed by bishop to f6. This is a dead draw, guys. It's already a dead draw. That's cool, man. Look at all these guys throwing the fish up. Wishes come true on the Trout Show, says Ray Clay. So here in this position, and when we were analyzing this game during the match, Brooklyn was asking the question, what about rook to e6? Which is a very valid point, because you're just directly threatening to take that bishop and then come down to f8. That's a scary looking move. And if it wasn't for this h-pawn, if this h-pawn was even one square back, I think that that's going to be good enough to win. But the problem is in this line that he's got the move h2. So you don't have time now to take this because of the pawn queening. So instead you're going to be forced to come back. The pawn is going to queen anyways. You're going to be forced to take it. And now I'm going to get this... is that right? Hold on, let me see this. No, just if there, then I think we just do bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. So if rook takes, we will do rook takes, knight takes, and then queen. And if knight takes, then we will push for a queen anyways. The rook will have to take, and then we will do rook takes knight, which is something similar to what happened in the game. So that was a very interesting idea to spot the concept of playing here with the intention of trying to win that bishop and then playing down to f8. But only because of the exact placement of that pawn. That pawn was even one square further behind. It wouldn't work because you have the time to take the bishop and then move over to here. Stop the pawn in time. Wow, where'd you get that? Fort Bush. Where'd you get that one from, Rufus? Yeah, but that's a great concept, and that's a really important concept that you struck on. You're also attacking the c-file, the c-pawn, and also there's kind of like an x-ray attack on that king. So this is a really, really good square, and I think that's your tactics training coming into play again, Brooklyn. You're spotting the correct ideas. So it's only because of a trick on the board that makes that move wrong. If it was not for that exact pawn in that exact place, this move would be totally valid and would probably be winning on the spot. So you came up with something good there. You came up with a good move. So bishop to f6, a3, another beautiful move. Fabiano already senses the fortress coming up. He intends to play his b-pawn push. b5, trying to get to b4 first, but it's not going to work. White gets there, pawn takes, pawn takes. I mean, these pawns look terrible, and black's still up a pawn. But it's not good enough, folks. It's not good enough. Bishop takes pawn. It looks like he's hanging a free piece. But as we've already discussed, after knight takes, the move h2 is coming. Even if white were to play the move rook to e1, it doesn't make any difference. The pawn's going to still queen. You're going to have to take it, and then I'm going to take this knight. So rook takes knight, and we find ourselves in a textbook drawn ending. Magnus being who he is, he finds ways to make it interesting. There were a series of moves which white only had one response to, even in this dull position. So Magnus was so good, I probably would have broken here. Magnus would probably still beat me in this position. I'm almost sure of it. But this is a textbook draw. Yeah, well, that's the whole trick, Brooklyn Raw. That's all of those tactic puzzles and stuff like that. All of these positions we're looking at, that's always the trick. There's always, once you get the basics, it's just a matter of, it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube, you know? You know the technique, you just got to put all the squares in the right place, that's all. So you've got the basics. You've got the hard part is out of the way. You know what I mean? And that's just a matter of practice. You know, like anything else. You know, you can read a book and say, this is how I'm supposed to defend a player in a game of basketball. This is where I'm supposed to put my feet. This is the angle I'm supposed to cut off. You can read all that stuff in a book, but until you get on the court and play somebody, you don't really know. You don't really know how difficult that is to put into practice when you get speedy guys with a lot of little foot tricks and stuff. You know. So just practice. You know, you still have to practice what you learned. You know, you pass the bar exam and you think you're a lawyer. You're not a lawyer yet. You have no trial experience. You still have to go do jury duty for the next 2 years. You know, or duty counsel for the next 2 years to get a little bit of courtroom experience. You know, it doesn't matter what you learned on paper. The real world's a different situation. So that's it. You've got the hard part out of the way, but there's just some practice now. So keep up on those puzzles and Brooklyn's saying he wants the football analogies. Are you a football guy? Yeah, well, Rufus got the football analogies. He's kind of got that cornered right now. I don't know if you heard what he wrote earlier, but that was pretty genius. So yeah, he's he's got that covered. Yeah, I used to believe that chess was all a big plan that I solved. Then I solved tactics, and it all lighted up. Like there is no plan. There's mostly a bunch of crazy shit going on the board. I mean, there's a plan, but the nuts and bolts of it, the particulars of the order of things that's the whole trick to chess. I used to think people did 20 moves ahead in their head. Then I learned they just string together 2 or 3 move combos. Yeah, I've told this story before how there's a special. I keep forgetting to get the link for it, but there's a special like a BBC special or something where they took the brain of a grandmaster and they studied the brain activity of a grandmaster and the brain activity of a normal player, and they put them in a similar position and got them to solve puzzles on the chessboard, thinking that the grandmaster had dramatically more brain activity going on, and that's why they were better chess players. It turned out that the opposite was true. It turned out that, in fact, the grandmaster had dramatically less brain activity than the lower-rated player, indicating that he had to think a lot less in those positions than the weaker player, because he already knew the patterns. The patterns were in his head. So he just spotted a pattern, pieced it together. This pattern reminds me of this. This is going to lead to this type of a position, which I already know is 1, and he didn't have to figure out all of the particulars. He just already knew that game was 1, and that's an experience thing. That's an experience situation. Pattern recognition. That's what you get from that experience. So moves that seem obvious at first, suddenly a red flag goes off in your head and you say, wait a minute. If I play rook e6 attacking that bishop on f6, now I realize he can push his h-pawn. I've seen this movie before. A little light bulb goes off in your head. And you think about that when you're thinking of playing your rook to e6, because you've seen that before. Right? So once you start getting that pattern recognition, the chess becomes a lot easier, man. And it does come. It's just practice. Let's see what Rufus said there. There's the... Okay, so Rufus has reposted his football analogies, which I think are just brilliant. That is fantastic, Rufus. Hey, yeah, keep those coming. I'm compiling them for each day, says Brooklyn and Rufus. Very nice. Yeah, Chess Crab. Yeah, that's... I'll try to find that. I think it might have even been Daniel Gormali, who I've played live here on the show. I could be wrong. I don't want to make that comment without knowing for sure. But I seem to remember that it was Daniel Gormali. I'm going to find that link for you guys. I promise I'm going to bring that on the stream so you guys can check that out. But if you go to YouTube and check out like chess documentaries or something, hopefully you can find that. You know, it was just a very interesting... I don't even know if it was on specifically chess. It might have just been about, you know, studying brain patterns and stuff like that. And it just happened that they had that segment on chess players. But I'm going to find that for you guys. I will find that video for you guys so you can check that out. It was very, very fascinating. How do you cheer a message? I don't know if you can bit cheer a message. You can just put out your emotes, but if you want to cheer Rufus, just go check out his stream. He's doing early morning streams, and hopefully he'll do a number more of them throughout the World Championship match. Some sort of pre-game shows and stuff. So, you know, just go on his show and give him some cheers there, man. Give him a follow and go check him out, man. Rufus is one of the best guys on here. Sparry's off. Good night. Nice hanging out. Thanks, Sparry. I appreciate you hanging around, man. Oh, you're playing a rapid tournament tomorrow. Right on. Cool. Good luck, man. Let us know how it goes. Maybe we can take a look at one of your games. So, guys, we're going to just kind of blitz off these last few moves. Basically, nothing's going to happen. Here's the problem with this endgame. And here's where, like, your Philidor's, again, pattern recognition, guys. Here's where, if you know your Philidor's ending, as Brooklyn Raw comes in with some biddies. Thank you very much. You got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 little biddies coming in from Brooklyn Raw. Thank you very kindly, man. Hopefully, yeah, looks like the tip jar is working okay. Pickle Pawn had, like, some ghost bits where you dropped a bit and it just, like, hovered in the middle of the tip jar. It was, like, ghostly. It was bizarre. He was having all kinds of weird OBS Streamlabs problems. I think it's because they had a big update, so that it's a little bit glitchy. It's very, very weird. Anyways, my tip jar seems to be working okay. Thank you for those bits, Brooklyn. I appreciate that. So, yeah, and there's another one from Mr. Rufus. Thank you, Mr. Rufus. He got all of his football stuff up. Man, I got to get those emotes. I got to try to get those emotes going. So if you know your Philidor's position, you know the white king is in front of the pawns. You might think 3-on-2, well, white's going to win and black's going to win. And plus, these two white pawns are so garbagey looking. But there's this nice little king box. Okay? Here's your little king box. Okay? And that king can do a lot of damage against a lone rook within that little area. You can even expand that king box. You can make it that this is the king box. Now, within this square, black can very easily get to any one of these corners, attacking these corner squares so that a rook can't stay there. So there's a lot of power that the white king can do within this box. And the king is in front of the pawns. This rook is going to be used to laterally protect this, stop these pawns from advancing. And if necessary, if they ever do advance, the rook can go behind the king and start attacking and checking from back. The common strategy, folks, if you're ever in a rook and pawn ending, number one, keep your rook as far away from the enemy king as you can. Even if there doesn't seem like there's any reason to it, never ever give your opponent any chance to come up with some little tempo move where suddenly you have to ignore their move and they make another move and all of a sudden they're attacking your rook and they win a tempo, a critical tempo, which could cost you the entire game. Just keep your rook as far away as possible. If your rook is trying to stop this pawn, this c-pawn from moving to uncover the rook, it will do the same job whether it's on h6, g6, f6, d6 or e6, or e6 or d6. So why put it on like d6, allowing the black king to move over here and then attack your piece with tempo by moving to c7 or something like that? Why give him that chance? Why not keep your rook as far away as possible? It's doing the same job there as it is on d6. Very important, just a principle thing. It will help you to make decisions when you're in time pressure and stuff. Just remember the rook belongs as far away from the king as possible in a rook and pawn ending. So the rook moves up, the king moves over, the king comes to c3, rook to d7. Once again, you see, here's that strategy. Rook to g6. It doesn't have to go to g6. It could go to e6. it could go to f6. It's doing the same job. Why did he choose g6? And let's turn on the computer for a second. Let's turn on the computer, see what the computer says. Rook to f6, number one choice. Even though all of these moves are fine, lead to a similar evaluation. By the way, this computer will probably eventually say that these lines are all identical. And it does. See how it says 0.62 on all three of those lines? What the computer is saying is that it feels like black should be winning by a certain amount, but it can't see any improvements. The reason it can't see any improvements is because there actually is no win. This is a dead draw. That's why it's saying 0.62 on all three lines. There's no changes in the different moves. They're all identical. It feels like black should be winning on the basis of his extra pawn. It's not a win. It's a dead draw. And you'll see that it does still suggest rook to g6, rook to f6, and rook to e6. It's suggesting all of those moves are fine, but it does put rook to g6 as its number one choice, and there's a good reason for that, because the rook belongs as far away as possible from the king. That's standard strategy. So the king comes back. He's going to play his rook to d6. He's hoping he can move his king up and then someday push his c-pawn, try to take advantage of the outside passed pawn, but he's not going to get that chance. The rook's going to come back. Rook over to, again, same thing that black is doing. Move that rook as far away as possible over to the king. Don't give the king a chance to get any tempos against your rook. The rook's going to come over, attack the pawn. Once again, the rook comes back over to the corner, and this game is just going to peter out into a draw. I didn't even finish looking at all the lines. Once again, the rook laterally preventing the pawns from pushing, and even if they could, the rook will just come behind the pawns and attack the king. The king won't be able to come out in front of the pawn because there's a white king there. And so this game just peters off into a draw. Dead draw. And it went on for a few more moves after this. It was like a 90 move game. I don't know how many the final move count was. Is this it right here? Oh, let's take a look at how many moves it actually was. It was actually a 114 move game, guys. A 114 move game. Wow. Could possibly be the longest game in the history of the World Championship. I'd have to check into that. But at any rate, there's your game one. It had its ups and downs. It was topsy-turvy. Magnus more than once was completely crushing in that game. And Fabi came up